section we are going to talk about our adhesives that we use. Now, what we use in the industry of semi-permanent lash extensions is what we're doing is a different adhesive to the normal strip lash or latex-based adhesives that we buy normally in like local pharmacies that we can use for strip lashes, or like I said, cluster lashes, which are weekend or party lashes. Now, our adhesive is cyanoacrylate based. It's a form of super glue. It's also used in nail glue, hair extension glue, and medical grade hospital glue, like we stick the skin together with. But obviously it's developed at a certain level that it's safe to be used on the eyes. Our adhesives in the UK that we retail, they must have very, very strict regulations on them that meet the EU certification and ensure that they're safe to be used on clients. Now, in the UK, we do have some of the highest regulations that actually supersede most of them across the globe, and I've worked very, very closely with my glue manufacturers. There are a lot of adhesives that are produced out there. Most of them are actually produced out in China and Japan. Now, in the UK, we cannot actually import and sell these because they don't meet the regulations, and actually I see a lot of these adhesives being sold in the UK, and I know they're not safe to be sold. The thing is, I will always do everything correctly. My client care is paramount. I could buy super cheap adhesives out there, stick a label on them and sell them and not have the regulations of it. And that would be fine until something happened and it went to court, and then I've got to produce the paperwork for it, and I'm not willing to take that risk. So guys, please be very careful of the adhesives that you use. Don't just assume that because it's being sold on the internet, it's safe to be bought. Make sure that you do your research on your adhesives that you buy, guys, because they have to be safe. There's a lot of other additives that they put in these adhesives that are not safe. So I don't want to scare you guys, but just know that our adhesives that are produced here in the UK are certified to the highest level, are super safe, are of the highest quality, and I will always put my name to them. So come to the shop and buy with confidence good quality adhesives. So how does our adhesive work? Okay, so eyelash adhesive doesn't dry, it actually cures, and curing is the use of moisture that is in your lashing space, floating around in the air, that causes a reaction with the adhesive called polymerization and makes it cure. Now, cyanoacrylate actually takes a full 24 hours to cure. However, most of the curing process, they say, happens within the first 3 hours, usually then within the next 12 hours, and is fully cured within 24 hours. So it takes a full 24 hours for it to cure and go hard, and it will cure from the inside outwards. Now, cyanoacrylate is very temperamental. It's a proper diva, and it requires the perfect control of both humidity, which is moisture levels in your lash room, and temperature. Guys, if you forget any other content in this course, you cannot forget this, because if you don't do this or control these levels, which I'm going to speak about, your lashes won't last, all your clients' lashes will fall off, and they'll be coming back to you unhappy. So don't make the same mistakes I did as a young technician when I didn't know about any of this, because we didn't know about the science behind our product works, and I lost loads of customers and nearly shut my business. And I don't want you guys to have to go through what I went through as a young technician. So, like I said, your adhesive requires the perfect control of temperature and humidity. It's going to be like baking a cake. You've got to set your oven at the right temperature if you want your cake to bake correctly, if you want your lash glue to cure, and I'll talk about this now. So, and we'll talk about how you can control those levels in your lashing room. So what happens if you've got too lower levels of moisture and temperature in your lashing space? If it's too cold and your humidity levels are too low, your glue is going to undercure. It's going to stay wet and sloppy. So if you don't cook your cake mixture at a high enough level in the oven, your cake is going to come out of the oven and it's going to be undercooked, and it's going to be all gushy and slimy like it was in the bowl first of all. But then if you've got the opposite and you've got too much moisture floating around in your air and it's too hot in your lashing space, your glue is going to over-cure. It's going to shock cure and bloom. So shock curing is when it fractures or it burns like a cake, and blooming, it will start to go white and frosty. So a bit like your cake, if you burn your cake in the oven because your temperature's set too high, your cake will come out, it's all hard and crispy and burnt. Not nice. The same happens to lash glue. Now, humidity provides primary polymerization of the product. Let's keep it simple. Humidity is the glue's best friend. It likes humidity the most, but its very, very close second friend is heat. So actually you've got to control both. You can't control one without the other, because then you never know what's going to go on with your adhesive. Now, important, cyanoacrylate requires a humidity range of 45 to 55% and a temperature range of 19 to 24 Celsius, which is 66 to 75% Fahrenheit. It's a bit like having a sponge cake mixture. Most of them need to go in the oven at about 180 degrees. Okay, some may be 160, some you might be able to get away at 200, it's got a bit of a range. But if you set your oven at 50 degrees, it's not going to cook, and if you set your oven at 300 degrees, it's not going to cook either, or not going to cook properly. Lash glue is no different, so I want you to think about lash glue as being a cake mixture, and you've got to set your oven correctly. So you may be thinking, well, how do I control the levels in my lashing space to perfection? And I'm going to teach you about this. And actually, this is why most good lash technicians, well, firstly, don't work mobile. So guys, you can't work mobile as a lash technician. You're going to struggle, because when you go into people's houses, you can't control the levels because you need lots of devices to do it. Also, a lot of lash technicians like to have a small room, because in a small room you can control it. Imagine if you were in a massive room or a big mall or something doing lashes. There's no way that you're going to be able to control the levels because the space is too big, and it's the same here. So as lash technicians, we prefer smaller rooms where we can shut the doors, shut the windows, and control everything to perfection. So first of all, you're going to need to get a hygrometer, or hydrometer, some people call them. They're a little battery-operated box about 4 to 5 inches tall, and they will tell you the temperature and humidity readings in your room. I recommend you get 2 or 3 of them and space them around your room, because your room will read different readings depending where it is. If it's nearer a window, it might read colder. Obviously, if it's nearer a heater, it might read hotter. So get 2 or 3 so you can measure the overall levels. Also, if your batteries go in one of them, you can take the readings off the other ones. I use 3, and I take a mean reading of all of them, so an average reading for me to know. So once you know what's going on with your temperature and humidity, you can then set your levels of your devices that you're going to need to control it. So you're going to need 3 devices, which some times of the year will not ever get used. So first of all, you're going to need a humidifier. So what a humidifier does is it adds moisture or steam to the room. So it's a bit like boiling a kettle. It will pump warm steam out of it. It must be a warm mist humidifier. It's got to be quite a big unit, normally about 1 foot tall by about 1 foot wide. These little diffusers that just send out a little puff of steam are no good. It's got to be like a kettle boiling, where you can physically see that plume of steam coming up into the room. So if you're very dry, so if you live in a country or state that's very dry, whether it's very cold or whether it's very hot and it dries all the air out, it could be that your humidity readings are very low. Some places in Canada that get very cold, their humidity on some days is 5%. Well, that's 40% lower than what lash adhesive likes, so your glue would never cure. It would just stay big, wet and sloppy, and when you put your extension onto the natural lash, your adhesive won't cure. It will just stay thick and sloppy, and the lashes will just literally brush out. So if your hygrometer is showing low humidity, you're going to need to turn your humidifier on before your client arrives to get your levels up to at least 45%. Now, if you live in a very damp climate, maybe you're in Florida where it's very humid, or in the UK in the sort of late summer, autumn time, it can be very humid here. Your humidity levels might be very high. So my old lash room always sat at about 69 to sort of 75% humidity. It was quite a low building. It sat in the ground, sort of underground, so it was very damp. It took all the moisture out of the ground. It was always damp in there. My walls, they were always pretty damp. So I had to have a dehumidifier, which is a big electronic device, normally about 1.5 to 2 foot tall, looks like a mini air conditioning unit. You turn it on and it literally sucks the moisture out of the room. So I had to remove all of that excess moisture because my glue would have shock cured. It was going off too quick. It was curing before I could get it onto the natural lash, and then when I brushed the lashes, they'd shock cured and they all fell out. So I needed that. I also needed an air conditioning unit because when it's very hot in the summer in the UK, we get about a week in the UK where we have a very hot week. It's too hot to lash. and all a fan does is just blow the warmer air around. So I had to get an air conditioning unit to actually cool the air in the room and take my temperature from, let's say, 32 degrees down to 23 degrees. We haven't got it on here, but heating. So again, if it gets really cold in the winter, you're going to need to turn your central heating on or get a little fan assisted heater to bring your temperature up to about 19, 20, 21 degrees for your adhesive to work properly. Now for me, I know that about 21 degrees is a nice level to have in your lash room for it to be comfortable for your client. I also know that the adhesive that I like to work with, which is an advanced adhesive on the shop called Ruby, likes about 51% humidity for the speed that I work at it. Now you will have seen that we gave you ranges on the other page, and that's because it all depends at the speed in which you work out what your range would be. So I can use the same glue, Ruby, as my colleague Sarah, but because I'm quicker lashing than her, I can afford for my temperature and humidity to be a little bit higher to speed up the cure of the adhesive. Whereas my colleague, she works slower than me, so she needs her temperature and humidity to be a little bit lower to give her a little bit longer to work at her speed. So this is why we give you a range, because you've got to figure out what your speed is like and also how that adhesive works for you. We can't say, right, work it at this and this and it'll work, because it depends on your speed. So you have to play around with it and figure out what works for you. Now, if you fail to purchase these devices, and they're probably going to cost you about another $500 to get these, and once you've got them for life. But if you fail to purchase these devices and control your temperature and humidity in your lashing space, you're basically winging it. You are playing Russian roulette with your client's retention, which is why we've got a picture of a gun down here on the right-hand side. Because if you were going in a baking competition and you had all of the right cake ingredients, but you literally closed your eyes and turned the oven to just a guess of temperature, how would you ever know that your cake is going to bake correctly? You might have got lucky and turned your oven to the right temperature, and then your cake turned out lovely. But what if you turned it too low or you turned it too high? Your cake is going to be a mess, and that's the same with lashes. Also, if your temperature and humidity is not spot on, your glue doesn't work for you. So you want your glue, when you place it onto the natural lash, to grab nicely and set that lash in place. If you don't, it doesn't work nicely. So it then makes your job really difficult. So this is why you have to control this. And like I said, guys, don't ignore this. Don't think, oh, Frankie doesn't know what she's talking about. I won't buy any of these. I'll just wing it. It doesn't work. You might get lucky. You might have a lash room that sits at a good temperature and humidity. So my new salon that I've got, it's perfect. I'm really lucky where it is. It sits at pretty much the same temperature and humidity that I want it at. Whereas actually my old lash room was so damp. I had to have all these devices, where at the moment I can go in the morning in my new salon and it's pretty much perfect, and I don't have to turn these devices on. So it all depends on your rooms that you work in, and it means that actually what you have to do is you have to be in your lash room about an hour before your client arrives to have a look at your hygrometer, see what it's reading, and then turn your devices on. And lots of times you'll have to run multiples, because for example, if your room was too cold and you put some heat in there, it will actually dry the air out. So you then could have to turn your humidifier on to add more moisture to the air. So you have to work these devices together to a lot of the time to make them get your levels. Also, once you get it to your levels, you turn them off. But then when you're working your client, and your body heat and your breath added moisture to the air will change the levels again. So as you're working your clients, you'll have to get up off your lashing chair and just turn your devices on and off to try and get those levels to stay at pretty much that level. It's a bit of a nightmare when you start out, but once you get the hang of it, it's fine. And I hope you can now see why you can't work in big spaces where you can't control the levels, or you can't actually work mobile, because unless you are the world's strongest man and has got about 8 arms like an octopus, there is no way that not only can you carry your lash bed, your stool, your lamp, your equipment, but also a big air conditioning unit, a humidifier, a dehumidifier, your hygrometers. It's not possible. You can't do it. So please, I'm sorry, you can't lash mobile. And if you do try to wing this, then what you're going to get is clients phoning you up the next day to say, I'm really sorry, but all of my lashes have come off and you need to come back, or I need to come and visit you and you need to top them up for free. And that's what happened to me when I was a new technician. I actually was working with a basic intermediate adhesive, which kind of, they tend to deal with a range of temperatures and humidities, intermediate, low, sort of slower curing ones. But when I then moved on to a more advanced adhesive, which is more temperamental, so the more advanced the adhesives are, the more temperamental they are. We had a hot spell in April, May time. Without knowing it, my temperature and humidity had gone up to extreme levels, and literally every single client's lashes fell off over 3 weeks. All had to come back. I had to lash all of them for free. I lost a ton of money and nearly shut my business because I didn't know what was going on. So guys, like I said, I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I have. A lot of this stuff still isn't taught, but like I said, if you forget anything in the manual, please don't forget this bit. Please go out and buy these. I know it's another investment that you've got to make, but if you want to do a job and you want to do it well, you've got to have these devices, because otherwise your lashes will fall off. Don't bother getting out of bed in the morning and lashing, because you are going to have unhappy customers.